Hi, and welcome back to Statecraft with Brett Stewart. Brett Stewart is in the newsroom, it seems like. It sounds like you had a little bit of a trek to get back in there and for safety's sake. You said you had seen some protests and stuff. Why don't you tell the audience what was going on today?
Yeah, so our last broadcast about an hour and a half ago, I was down at the Washington Memorial, and they are not letting people around because of the parade route that's going to be passing through here. About 2 minutes ago, the parade started.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I'm going to turn off my notifications here. Okay, we're doing mobile broadcasting here, so I keep getting stuff. So in any case, I was all the way down there, and they actually didn't just make us go on the west side of the White House. They made us go all the way down through the suburbs, like a couple miles west of the White House. So I walked all the way through those suburbs and all the way back through, and then around 2 police barricades, which checked all my stuff again, just to get back downtown. I am currently at the Medill newsroom, which is essentially a branch of Northwestern here in the city. They're operating out of the newsroom down on G Street. So they're hosting on my team here, which is just very wonderful of them because we actually have a newsroom to work out of. So
cool.
So in regard to the protests, we are seeing some stuff down on 12th Street. We're seeing some people getting pepper sprayed, but by and large, it's starting to wind down. I couldn't really get anything because there's nothing on the western or even the northern side of the city. It's all primarily happening way far east.
Okay.
It's starting to wind down. I was in CVS very briefly. It was triumphant finding a CVS. Apparently people in DC do not need convenience stores. So I could literally not find any. But I found one, and I was going down there triumphantly buying my chapstick, and I ran into a guy whose face was completely red, starting to blister up a little bit. And he had been pepper sprayed down there on 12th. And he was in CVS trying to get something for his face. He actually wouldn't talk to me on a mic or with his name. That's one of the things as a journalist. As soon as I talk to someone interesting, first thing I do is pull out the microphone and try to get it recorded. But you can't always happen. But I did anecdotally talk to him off the record, and he got pepper sprayed, getting pretty close to the police barricades, a little too close. And that's just something you have to be careful with as protesters down there.
Oh, I bet. Well, we have a bunch of questions that we'd like to kind of go over.
Let's crank through some of these questions before we do our panel this evening.
You have a bunch. So one of the first questions our own Sean Burns asked, how do you feel about Trump's plan to colonize the moon in the next few years? You think that's a little ambitious, or you think it's something that...
I think it's better than Newt Gingrich's plan in 2012. If people actually remember, like, I'm joking, but I'm also not, because Newt Gingrich was actually gung-ho on moon colonization. Basically, all of Gingrich's policies when he was running for president were very reminiscent of Bond villains. And I don't think Trump is... I don't think we're injecting a lot of money into technology anytime soon. When we're reviving the coal industry, I don't think we're worrying about space exploration as much as ideally we should. Yeah. So I don't foresee it in the next 5 years, Sean. I think we might have to wait a little bit longer. But unless Elon Musk, maybe he can get there. Maybe he needs to do it privately.
Well, here's a good question Reagan poses for you. What are you most looking forward to policy-wise in the next 4 years?
Has
he given us
question,
policy?
Reagan? Not really. Okay, here I got you. Well, to talk about his policy in general, I mean, we talked about this earlier in the day a couple times. He wants to bring trade back home. He wants to create American jobs. He wants to dial back on alternative energy and push harder on the coal industry, push harder on American manufacturing, all of which can have mixed effects. Yes, it can create jobs, but does it also perpetuate a cycle of us not evolving technologically with the rest of the world, especially in a growing marketplace where China and India and even places like Mexico and Taiwan to an extent are growing as manufacturing capitals and technological capitals. Do we want to get sucked back into the old way of doing things? I don't know. For me personally, to answer both as a journalist and as a citizen, I hope that Trump can go down into the south side of Chicago and fix it. And what I mean by fix it, because it's hard to fix.
Mm-hmm.
What I mean by that is, as a resident of Chicago, as a journalist from Chicago,
Mm-hmm.
I place the difficulties of the south side squarely on the Democrats. It is not the Republicans' fault because they're not in power there.
Mm-hmm.
It has been Democrats that have controlled the city of Chicago for many, many, many years.
Mm-hmm.
And it's Democrats that have turned a blind eye to the south side of Chicago and have made it as violent as it is.
Mm-hmm.
And that is a perpetuating horrible problem in that city. When Trump was campaigning in his final weeks, he pushed really hard on fixing American infrastructure within urban cities urbanized cities to try to break some of that perpetual cycle of gang violence and gun violence. And if that means that Trump needs to get down with Rahm Emanuel and send in the National Guard in there for a little while so people stop getting shot every day,
Mm-hmm.
so I have to stop waking up to the news and see 30 people were killed in Englewood, I'm
Mm-hmm.
okay with that.
Yeah.
I think that's something that party aside, I think the Democrats have been very soft on, and regardless who it is, someone needs to go down there and fix the south side of Chicago. And it can't just be done by driving in the National Guard, right? Like then we're just going to have 1989 Watts,
Right.
which we saw in California.
Right.
It has to be a mixture of things, but it's not a bad start. It's not a bad start to have people stop getting shot all the time. As someone who lives in Illinois, I'm sure you see it on news reports regularly too.
I do, and actually, I'm originally from Detroit, so which is typically a Democratic-run city as well. However, to kind of put on that, the city is changing, and I believe even though it's been Democratic for a while, I think that there is just a shift in power, and there's some good things going on down there. It's hard to blame one side or the other. I get that, the Democrats have run here, but, you also kind of have to look at the big picture, like what power have they been given, at a state level and a federal level? Because when you get down to it's so broken, Detroit is being a great example. It was so broken. What do you do? How do you fix it? Where do you even start? Between having no police that even want to come out and, police the area to there's no lights in the city, just simple things.
Right.
Where do you start and where do you get the funding for that? And, that's where it takes a village to kind of raise a child. And, I feel that Detroit itself is a child. And, the great thing about Chicago, which is so different than Detroit. Detroit is its own entity, and the surrounding suburbs kind of help facilitate any type of monetary value for Detroit, and they pretty much have pulled out. And so with Detroit, you've got South Side, you've got all these different sides, with Chicago, where, Chicago is still a good city, regardless of the fact that you have this bad area, but Chicago as a whole, people come to visit, people vacation, people want to see the big city, those type of people live there, and it's diversified. That's just something missing from Detroit. So I would be curious to see if he can come in and make a difference at that point. Now, a writing question on that, since you were looking forward to that, what are you dreading in the next 4 years on policy?
As we talked about, I'm getting a little bit of echo from your end.
Oh,
myself. Are you? Yeah, I'm hearing myself. There we go. Now it's gone. Okay. In any case, his demeanor towards journalists. That's not necessarily policy, but it is to an extent once you're curating your press corp. I am dreading us getting bogged down too much in industry and ideas that are not sustainable for a technological future. So again, the coal industry, manufacturing jobs, American factory workers. I know it was scary for Hillary Clinton to stop by, Pennsylvania and Michigan and Rust Belt, Wisconsin, that sort of thing, and come to these people and say, hey, you know how you've been a factory worker and your dad was a factory worker and his dad was a factory worker and you've sustained your family for 100 years as factory workers. That's going away now, but maybe we can teach you HTML shrug.
Yeah.
And I totally get that fear.
Right.
And that is something that I strongly believe that is one of the reasons Clinton lost so miserably in those states when she should have won them.
Yeah.
And that's because Trump went down there and he said, we're going to bring that back. But the problem is that I understand that emotional tie to that industry, and I sympathize with it, because I can't imagine having my entire community's way of life being upended by technological advancement.
Right. Well, and like, for example, in our family, I mean, we've got artists and radio, you know, basically is what we've got going. So, I mean, at any given moment, you know, James could have his livelihood taken away too. He could be uprooted by computers that just decide to carve the stone for him, laser tech, all that kind of stuff. And, you know, you don't need a stone carver by hand. So yeah, I do get those mason jobs. I do get those manufacturing jobs where, you know, we need those jobs as a society. There are some people that are the more intellectual levels that take the higher intellectual jobs, and then we have middle America, and then we have, you know, the poorer society and things like that. We need those jobs to sustain a good running society, period. Everybody has to do their part. So yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. But I think one thing is that, for example, say your factory job is no longer becoming sustainable because you're being replaced by automation, right? This is something as old as Willy Wonka.
Right.
And being replaced by the toothpaste.
With the Industrial Revolution. I mean, we're
exactly.
just in a different sense.
Exactly.
Right?
Willy Wonka's father getting replaced by the toothpaste machine.
Right.
Then you know, the contemporary solution to that is, okay, we don't need these jobs anymore because either our machines are doing it, or we've outsourced them to countries that are lower on the totem pole of their industrial advancement.
Yeah.
Then I think what needs to happen is those communities need to be, you know, like, let's inject education into those communities. So these people are you know, they're being raised in these communities, in these blue collar communities, but they can stay in their industry. They can stay in their industry, but they can advance in that industry. They can manage what they're doing instead of acting as a factory worker. They can be engineers and help create and facilitate the automation that is happening within their facilities. And that's kind of the future of an ideal future, I think, of an American workforce. And I think that's going to happen under a Trump presidency, because Trump relies on people holding on to the past. Ironically, even though his entire inaugural address today was very much the past is gone, the future is now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think true, you know, you're ringing true on something that, you know, we've talked about in this household a couple of times, is basically, you know, how do you get somebody out of the ghetto, out of welfare, who have been born into it, and there's been no change. And, you know, we're talking about people like, well, why don't you just get a job, or why don't you just join the military? Well, most of these people by age 12 or 13 already have a record. They might have, you know, been in the drug industry, so to speak. And it causes problems to, like, go ahead and just join the military at 19. Sorry, you've already been, you know, you already have a felony. We can't.
Absolutely.
So the thing is, you know, doesn't make it more difficult. It does. And the only way to change that is to, you know, interject at a very early age education. And that's all you can do. And to give people similar opportunities. And what's interesting is that before we moved here, we came from a poorer neighborhood in Detroit, and we moved here, and this is a more affluent area. And it's very interesting to see what opportunities are available to kids in different areas. And it kills me, because you know how smart my kid is. And the thing is, it's like, it didn't matter how smart she was. It had nothing to do with, you know, how decent she was. The fact was, the education system wasn't there. And whose fault is that at this point? You know, it's where are we putting our dollars, which brings us to Davos, you know, this new appointee who hasn't been appointed yet for the Department of Education. I about spit out all of everything that I was drinking for the last 3 days as I was listening to her testimony and things like that. She is clueless. And that,
yeah, she's getting raked over the coals by people like Elizabeth Warren, that's for sure.
Right, absolutely. And the thing is to not know exactly what the American Disabilities Act was and what you need to have that in school, what an IEP is, all these types of things. What? That is the kind of out of touch that we don't need. That is almost like Hillary Clinton going in and like, oh, well, we'll just give you all computers and you'll just be better. It's like, let's, walk through this a little bit easier. So, yeah.
Yeah, and that's a systemic issue of some of Trump's appointments. For example, why is Ben Carson running urban development and housing? He's never
as good
lived
as
in it.
Harvey, hanging out with them and helping them, yeah.
Yeah, and that's something I would not be opposed to Ben Carson having some sort of governmental advisory position that was relevant to his medical experience.
Brain surgeon, yeah, exactly. Like
but that's completely irrelevant to him.
It really is. And you kind of wonder, did Trump just invite him because of his race and wanted to give him? He's like, put him over here. Give him some kind of something over here, and it just.
I think Ben Carson did right by him. I think that Ben Carson never attacked him as viciously as other opponents during the primaries. Mm-hmm. And then as soon as Ben Carson tapped out, he immediately flung his support behind Trump. So if anything, it's just a position that Trump didn't know exactly what he was going to fill it with. And then it's his way to, it's his way to pay it forward to people who helped elect him, which Carson certainly did, because Carson in particular had a lot of that evangelical vote. If they weren't with Cruz, they were with him. And his support went a long way with securing some of the more traditional conservatives for Trump.
Yeah, I mean, I 100% agree. Like, he pulled in the people that he needed to pull in, and he saw that at an early time. So he got the presidency for it. So here's some fun questions. So, Brett, what would you want Trump to build? A wall or a Death Star? # make Alderaan great again.
Well, Alderon's gone, so we can't necessarily make Alderaan great again. That said, I feel like the Death Star is slightly more economically feasible than the wall. The wall is incredibly and physically impractical, and that's another thing I'm dreading.
Yeah,
I would hope I'm fine if Trump wants to go down there and strengthen border security, and I'm sure at some point we're going to there's going to be a press release where Trump is standing in front of like a half-built corner of a wall, holding a shovel, wearing a hard hat, and giving a giant thumbs up to the camera, right? Like, that's going to happen,
right?
But we don't need to be building that wall, and Mexico's not going to pay for it, and I don't think Americans are going to love the prospect of paying for it themselves once it starts getting hit in their taxes.
Right.
So, yeah, Death Star. We could advance space travel, something that the government has not really had an opportunity to do in many years. The private sector has pushed forward most of space innovation in the last decade, especially with like SpaceX and Virgin Galactic. So yeah, I think Death Star is slightly more feasible, and it might actually make people like give a crap about NASA again.
Well, yeah, that's true. Why not? We did have Star Wars back in the 80s, and it feels like we're going back that way. So it's all good. I'm going to,
exactly
shave my head on the sides and put a little checkerboard here, and, girls just want to have fun. It's all good. So, okay, here's one. MFK, murder, fuck, or marry, fuck, kill, right? Do you think Donald Trump's hair, and Kellyanne Conway, how would you MFK that one?
Oh my gosh, that's difficult on too many uncomfortable levels. I think you have to go and marry Trump, right? You have to take the Melania route and at least go where the power is.
Yeah, take the money and run.
Yeah, you got to like marry the Trump, and then I'm gonna plead the fifth on the rest of this because I don't want to get into a rant about. Okay. I plead the fifth. We're moving on.
All right. So, hey, do you feel that this administration will have a positive or negative impact on cyber warfare?
I think it's going to have a negative impact on it because Trump knows very little about technological advancements in most capacities, particularly that of hacking. I think that hacking, especially by Trump, has been thrown around way too loosely. The Russians did not hack people like like the Clinton campaign with the Podesta emails. He was spearphished. I mean, they sent him a bunch of emails that looked like his bank, and then he gave them his email password, and then they signed into his email. That's not hacking. That's just
ignorance.
Yeah, it's spear phishing. So and mixed with technological ignorance, mixed with utilizing. It's essentially
maybe
hacking
too, not understanding the cyber age that we live in as well.
Yeah, and this is something that
Clinton
Clinton
just going to dismiss everything every time something comes up. Yeah, it's not happening, even though it's probably the biggest threat that we can have to our national security. I feel.
Well, Clinton was equally laissez-faire about this. We should point that out, that she had no idea what she was talking about either, especially for someone who was under FBI investigation for an email scandal. She really had no idea what was going on.
Yeah.
And that is something that maybe we can see in 4 to 8 years, because I have a gut feeling that we're going to see someone from Silicon Valley run for president, in which case that would be a technologically apt person. But when you have a president who doesn't fully understand cyber warfare, who doesn't fully understand what hacking is, who doesn't understand between spear phishing and hacking.
Oh, we lost him for just a second there. I'm sure he'll be right back. His internet has a tendency to go up and down while we're doing the show. Just to kind of catch up, murder, marry, fuck, kill, Donald Trump's hair, Kellyanne Conway. Just so you know how I would do that. I'd probably kill Trump. Just let that one go. I would probably marry Trump's hair because it's just ridiculous. And go ahead and just
their local
Kelly Conway. So, are you back there? Sorry about that. We lost you for a minute there. So go ahead and continue what you were doing, Brett.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yeah, absolutely. Just internet interference. Don't worry. When you see me doing the dance, that's what's going on.
Oh, okay. So in any case, what I was saying is we've seen in cities in California where recently the transit network was hacked. And people were getting free rides for a day, and that's very that doesn't create a lot of distress necessarily, but it does show the massive implications. What if we had larger leaks than even what we're seeing, for example, Yahoo, right? Verizon acquiescing Yahoo has been really difficult for them, because every single time they try to buy Yahoo. Yahoo is like, oh yeah, remember that data breach that we never patched 5 years ago, and we forgot to send people emails to recover passwords.
Yeah.
And that's all stuff that could happen at a governmental level, and especially when you have a president that's so active on Twitter, especially when you have an increasingly cyber connected age, it would be really nice to have a president who understood what that stuff was. And to be blunt, he's just like any other 70-year-old man. I just don't think he gets it.
Right.
Which I think
did have it, in the last president here. He was the first president to, obviously start using social media. And I almost want to say I kind of regret it. It's like,
Obama didn't understand the precedent he was setting. But yeah, Obama was much more cognizant of that. And some of that's his age. He was a younger man moving into office. He was more open to technological advancement. Obama has always been a huge advocate of the sciences. One of my favorite Obama moments is just watching him, giddy at the White House science fairs every year. He was so excited at those every year. And I don't know if we're going to see that from President Trump.
No.
So, yeah,
science,
I think
it's fake science. It's fake. That's why.
Fake. But to answer the original question,
staying on that same kind of line of thinking, what is your opinion of Donald Trump using social media and Twitter and stuff like that, since you've kind of hit on that a couple of times?
He needs to get the hell off it. I believe when the president of China starts saying that China, when they start saying that foreign policy should not be conducted on a public stage on Twitter, you really know you're going awry. And and I'm okay with him because here's the reason he uses Twitter is because it bypasses the press entirely, right? He doesn't have to go through a press agency. He doesn't have to have a press conference. Nobody can.
He doesn't have to talk to anybody. He just goes on.
Right. Right. He doesn't, no one has to interpret what he's saying and then give it to you. He can just give it to you in 140 characters or less. And he loves that, especially at his reading level. It's really great for him. Now, so with Trump, I think I would hope security wise, they pull him off it, similar to Obama being pulled off a smartphone in 08, in 09 rather. So I don't know. I mean, are we going to see less tweeting from him? One would hope.
I would hope.
My question actually, which we've never seen before, is Obama often tweets from the @POTUS Twitter handle.
Right.
And I'm very curious to see the transition of power in Twitter handles because Obama can no longer tweet from that handle.
No.
So I'm very curious as to like how they transition it. Like, do they keep Obama's old tweets on there? Like, because this is a really interesting millennial inquiry, right? Because when you change like your name or your photo on Twitter, it changes it with your history, right? So there's going to be stuff that the Obama administration signed by Obama that has Trump's face on it if they change that. And the only thing I can think they do is maybe like convert the current one into like a legacy account. And then move forward with a second account, and they'd likely have to work with Twitter on that. This is all weird semantics, but I'm fascinated by it.
Yeah, I'm kind of fascinated by the whole thing too.
Because we've never seen a transition of power in social media. No. Obama came around in 2009, what, a year after Twitter came out?
Yep.
Facebook had been around, but not to the prominence it is now.
Right.
So we're going to see that in the next couple weeks, and it's going to be absolutely fascinating.
Yeah, it will be interesting too. I kind of posed the question. Is it better to see less of this stuff as an American people and than what we've been seeing? I feel that President Obama as a social media, he was in social media. He was in, he was on Jimmy Kimmel and all these different places and, hanging out and stuff like that. But he did it with such grace and he did it with such fervor that it was, completely different than what Donald Trump is doing. And the thing is there's a level of embarrassment here, where I just, every time I see him tweet, it's almost kind of like a car wreck. It's like, you got to kind of look at it and you can't stop looking at it. But at the same time in your head, you're like, man, I just wish that didn't happen. I'm so, like shocked or in awe. So my question is to you, is it better to play ignorant a little bit and like not see some of this stuff and just let him handle presidential business? Or do we need to, as the American public, see everything that's going on?
That's a really good question, Carrie. And I think we're going to see a lot into the psyche of Trump because another one of the reasons he loves Twitter is not just because he can bypass the media, but because he can get continued adoration through it. Trump loves echo chambers, right? Like he loves to be cheered for. That's why he did victory tours. That's why he was such a prolific campaigner. That's why he's going to continue to tour because apparently you still campaign when you're president now, so people can cheer for you. And so, yeah, we're going to see a lot of the inner psyche of Trump because Trump is going to say whatever is on his mind, because if he can say it in a public forum of some kind with supporters surrounding him, they're going to cheer for him, and he definitely feeds off that. One thing I don't see Trump doing is sitting behind the desk in the Oval Office, sitting down doing a bunch of policy work, and then not getting restless by not having people cheer for him. Yeah. That's something that he really loves. One thing I would hope is that we can see if he's going to continue to tweet and continue to interact with the public the way he does.
Right.
I would hope that we also continue to scrutinize it. And I hope he learns his lesson, because right now he's very much, I don't want to say he's the boy who cried wolf all the time, but he'll tweet stuff, or he'll tweet stuff in the past, and he's the president of the United States, and then he'll get really salty when anyone critiques him on it in any capacity.
Yeah.
Trump has the thinnest skin
when he goes to do that. It's more so of, oh, you don't like me? Well, I absolutely hate you. Go sue him. Go do this. Go do that. You're out. You're just like out of the Trump circle. It's like, hold on, I was critiquing you, kind of a thing. And, falling on that same line of questioning, this is very interesting. And this is something that has kind of been plaguing the whole campaign, the whole thing for the last couple of years. In the last in the last day or so, people have gone on Twitter to tell a country music group Big and Rich that they're no longer fans anymore because they played at the inauguration today. So considering our constitutional rights and our freedom, how do you feel about not supporting someone just because of their beliefs? And what I want to add to that is, we've had friends on Facebook, on Twitter, those types of things. And there have been people who are like, well, I'm just not following them anymore, or I just don't want to talk to them anymore, and I'm done because their beliefs do not match mine, or are that of Donald Trump's, or are that of Hillary Clinton's, or whatever. What do you feel about that? Because I mean, this is a freedom that we do have, and it almost feels like the public is betting against each other at this point.
Mm-hmm. I think there's a difference between being angry at your family or friends for voicing opinions and being angry at public figures and / entertainment personalities for voicing their opinions. I was actually listening to Justin Robert Young's Politics X3. He does a very good show over there on Diamond Club.
Yeah.
And he made a good point that you can't have your cake and eat it too when it comes to entertainment performers.
Sure.
You can't love, like Robert Downey Jr. as Iron Man and then get angry when he has an opinion, right? And we see that a lot. We saw that with Meryl Streep.
Tom Cruise is a good one. I think that we always loved his movies, but we find out that he's Scientology. And what's funny is he still has a following, and I don't think it should stop people from enjoying a movie or a specific group because they have a different belief. I mean, if you've enjoyed it,
exactly.
We find out today that there's this. Now, having said that, I will say there are a couple of examples that I would definitely stop following somebody. If I find out that they are completely 100% racist.
Yeah, they're like a Klansman. I understand not wanting to.
Or they've murdered somebody. But, the fact is, it's kind of comes down to that whole religious freedom, that whole everything. I'm not gonna bark on somebody who's, has a Muslim opinion or a Jewish, opinion, from their God. If anything, I'm going to try to understand it, and I'm going to respect it. It's kind of like you respect the presidency. You don't have to respect the actual president, but you respect the office that is being held. And it's the kind of
exactly,
you're respecting the religion or their right to have religion. And that's something we have to do in this country. I mean, I almost feel like, we're turning into bullies here, like, hey, if you don't do what I do, you shouldn't be here. Now, just because I didn't vote for Trump, I mean, it's no secret. But I want the people that did vote for Trump here. It does give us a checks and balances, because we could have gone the other way on this. Think about if we had a Democratic controlled everything on this. I don't believe that's the right way to go either. I don't like the fact that it's all Republican controlled. I feel that there should be a balance, whether it's, 49% Democrat and, 51% Republican, that there's more of a balance there. But we need, I think, both those sides to kind of, slap the other one down, and say, hey, what about this or what about that? And it keeps, the conversation going, really.
Yeah, and to answer the original question about this band in particular or any musical artist, again, I think it's different if you have a quarrel within your family, within your friends. With regard to performers, you can't love what they're doing and then get angry when they have an opinion. They are people, and I'm a Kanye West fan. I disagree with Kanye on a number of things, and I disagree with the way he acts. I disagree with the way he handles himself. More recently, I've disagreed with many of his political ideals. I respect Kanye's opinion, and I respect Kanye as an artist, and I think that's a good example because at the end of the day, you have to acknowledge that these people are going to have opinions, and if you can separate those opinions from their art, which is very easy to do if you're just sit down and think about it rationally.
You're right.
You can listen to I have extended family to John Lennon or Bruce Springsteen, because they're the liberal scum of the earth, right? And it's like, come on, you can't listen to the boss because you're a conservative. Like, are you kidding me? That's a bridge too far, I think.
I would say this to the live, what is it? The B Street Band. That is the
B Street Band. Yeah.
What's interesting about them, before you get on them for playing, at the inauguration or whatever, they were contracted 4 years
2013. Ago. Yeah, so they really got screwed on this.
No clue that any of this was happening. And, it comes down to, we're going to breach contract. We could get sued. So then what do you do? So before you jump into the fire and start saying one way or another, make sure you have all your information down too. So do you think, Brett, that Donald Trump has the potential to be a great president, a good president, or the greatest president?
I don't think he has the potential to be the greatest president. No, I think he certainly has potential to be a very good president. Every president has the potential to be a very good president. I make like a snarky remark about either Nixon or like Carter, but like Carter's been a much better ex-president than he was president.
He has.
But I digress. Yeah, I think Trump has the potential to be a good president if he can bring good people around him, which is debatable right now, considering he's hiring people who don't know a lot about their positions, don't have much experience within those positions, and or his
greatest and the best and the greatest and the best.
Yeah,
and I'm like, what?
And or his family. Then that's problematic.
Great. It'll be great with veteran affairs. We'll just put him there.
Yeah, and it's either going to be fine. He's either going to be a more traditionally conservative president, in which case taxes will go down, foreign conflicts will likely get less involved in foreign conflicts. We'll probably support UK and Brexit pretty heavily. But I mean, it's either that or it's going to be a complete and utter train wreck, and there's really not a lot of middle ground.
Mm-hmm.
And as an American, I hope for the former. Just because I am concerned about Trump, and I've never said publicly who I voted for. I'm concerned about Trump for some things. Does not mean I don't want him to succeed. I want him to succeed. I want him to do well. I want him to accomplish things that will better people's lives. Mm-hmm. I want him to have regard for people who disagree with him. And that is something I find distressing with him, is that it's one thing that, the problem is that it's one thing to be a president and have detractors and be frustrated by them. It's another thing to just disregard their opinions entirely and just call them sad on Twitter.
Right.
And that's something I struggle with Trump, is that Trump has a tendency to lash out at anyone who gives him any sort of criticism in any capacity. Mm-hmm. And that's not conducive for a president, and he's going to get worn down in 4 years very, very quickly if he's going to keep doing that. And I suspect we're going to see a toning down of Donald J. Trump in the near future. I think diehard Trump supporters are going to be more disappointed in him than traditional Republicans, because he's not going to build the wall. He's not going to indict Hillary Clinton. He's not going to create a Muslim registry. He's not going to deport 11 million people. Mm-hmm. And those are all things that are good for, most Americans and more traditional conservatives and Republicans. And I think Trump supporters might be a little salty about it.
Do you think that Donald Trump sets a good example for our children?
And no. No, I mean, I can't be black and white about that. I mean, I can be black and white about that. Trump acts very immaturely, and you don't want your kids to be hearing some of the stuff that he says. No. Not just to Billy Bush on a hot microphone in a trailer, but also some of the things he says on the stand, and some of the things he says on reality television and his stump speeches. Trump shows questionable respect for not only anyone who disagrees with him, but women, which is a large part of this march tomorrow that we are going to cover.
Mm-hmm.
And also people of ethnic diversity. He's dicey with that. And
Sure.
and I think if kids want to look up to the president, and that's always a positive thing, then I think the things they need to look up with Trump are entrepreneurship. I mean, like, you got to give it to the man, right? Like, he became leader of the free world, and he's never held a political office. So if he can do it, you can do it. I think that's what kids should take away from it.
Right.
Is like literally anyone can. Well, maybe you need $1 million loan from a parent first, but
$14, but yep.
Right. But I think what any kid can take away from this is that you do not need to follow a traditional path to your goal.
Right.
I think that is something that kids can take out of it.
That's a good observation. I mean, good for you to pick something good out of this. But you're right that anybody,
yes,
president,
whatever your goal may be,
orange hair.
If you want to be a journalist, you don't have to go to J school. If you want to be an actor, you don't have to do the rounds on Broadway and toil away and do things traditionally. That is something that is the millennial mantra is do it differently.
Right.
And that's something kids can take away from Trump. He did it differently and it worked. So props to him for that.
Do you think now he is president that he should release his taxes? And if so, what kind of a impact do you think that would have on the country?
I struggle with that because he has the right to withhold them. Mm-hmm. It is tradition that he should have released them, mm-hmm. and it's good practice he should have released them. I think a number of things would be found, right? Like Trump probably has not given as much, if any, to charity as he says he had. Right. Another big thing is he's probably not as rich as he says he is. Mm-hmm. And then I think the third thing is we're going to see a lot of loopholes. So between those three things, those are the obvious reasons he's not releasing them. It's complete BS when he says that he's under audit, because you can release your taxes under audit. Yeah. The IRS has told him this numerous times. Yeah. So
which just made you think that there was something going on. I mean, he obviously screened it enough and then threw it this way and that way, and like, oh, the emails, he just kept going backwards and backwards. But it's like the one thing that I want to focus on is I'm not talking about Hillary Clinton anymore. We're going to be talking forward about Donald Trump in this presidency. So I have a question. What is your opinion on Donald Trump's Islamophobia, which he clearly has?
Yeah. I mean, the weird thing is like the Islamophobia is weird because he claims he doesn't, and the reason he claims he doesn't is because he's afraid of radical Islam, right? He called that out in his inauguration today. Yeah. And it's a valid concern. Radicalized Islam is real. It is something that is a threat to Americans abroad, particularly in the Middle East. Mm-hmm. And now we're seeing those threats extend throughout Europe in places like Berlin and places like Paris.
Yeah, we are seeing attacks happening, Right. But those are also by the extremists as well. So we need
exactly. Well, that's where the word radical comes in, right? Mm-hmm. Radical Islam. Right. I think what frustrates me is that I think he perpetuates the blurring of the line between radical and Islam. Mm-hmm. Because we have radical Christians, right? Come on.
Absolutely.
We've had radical Christians since the Crusades and before. Mm-hmm. And right now the primary radicalization of a religion is Islam. And I think what Christians need to wrap their head around, and what Americans need to wrap their head around, is that their religion is not a lot different from Islam. It's basically the same religion. Like, I'm just throwing it out there. Mm-hmm. You switch a couple names around and your texts are more or less identical, with the exception of a couple minute tenets. And Islam is a peaceful religion. Islam is a loving religion. Islam is the largest religion in the world.
Does the word itself mean peace?
Yes, it does. Mm-hmm. So I think Trump. I don't want Trump to instill that in American people who are uneducated about Islam and don't understand that it is a peaceful religion, because that creates a toxic atmosphere for people who are Islamic here in the United States and abroad, and that's not good. But I understand his frustration. I think that ISIS is still a problem. We're pushing them back.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, just recently they destroyed a whole series of Roman architecture that's been there for thousands of years, or hundreds.
Sure.
Thousands. Thousands.
In this country was today's kids that are 16, 17 years old type of a thing are getting harassed in schools and stuff like that, or things that happened in the year 2000 or 2001. And what's crazy is these kids weren't even born yet when 9/11 happened, for example. And here it is, years later, where we've caused all of this racism basically against a people. And like I said, I came from Detroit, and Detroit houses one of the biggest Muslim communities like in the country, Dearborn area. And I never, the whole time living there, came across anybody that was radical like that. And visited there quite frequently. Reagan's hospitals and doctors were there, so it was kind of like one of those things where I never felt that way. I watched a community just kind of start living in fear themselves, because not because they wanted to become part of the radical part, but they're like, how is the rest of America going to start looking at me? How am I judged moving forward? And how is a president like Trump going to bridge that divide and be very specific and say, look, there's radicalism and extremism all over the place. It happened to be in this instance this particular group, and it has nothing to do with the rest of the group. Not all, a few bad apples don't spoil the barrel type of an idea. And unfortunately, I feel that he doesn't feel that way.
Yeah, it doesn't help when he starts pushing Muslim registries, which he's already backed off on numerous times. Yeah, Trump doesn't understand Islam in any capacity.
Yeah, he doesn't.
And he needs someone to sit him down and explain it to him, but that's not going to happen. The best thing we can hope for is that a lot of his more radical ideals are just not going to become implemented. We're not going to see a registry. We're hopefully going to continue to see some degree of immigrant influx that is reasonable. That is one thing he can have some control over.
That registry just brings me back to, Nazism and just marking, a Jewish person. I mean, it's not.
Yeah, and also it's completely impossible.
We have a census. We have a census. We mark whether we're Caucasian, white, Asian, black, this, that, the other thing. We don't need this. I don't.
Also, it's completely infeasible. Like, what are you supposed to do? Like, when they get off the plane, he's supposed to, so, Muhammad, am I right? like how the hell are you so come on.
No, you can't.
You can't actually enforce that. So one thing, I need to wrap down here shortly because I'm on deadline for some other stories. We're going to be back later tonight. Why don't you hit me with one more question, and then we'll wrap down, and I'll be on studio equipment later tonight, which would be nice.
Absolutely. Okay, our last question is basically, do you believe, with all the things that are happening right now, that it's possible, because of the positioning that China and Russia are in right now, they're kind of grouping together, and Trump's basically causing foreign, problems kind of everywhere right now between Mexico and all these different places. Do you think it's possible he can cause another global war?
No, I don't think so, because Trump, you still have to have checks and balances by the government. We technically have not been in a war since World War II. Technically, right? Because we have never declared war since World War II, but we've been in a number of wars. But keep in mind, every single one of those conflicts had to get troops cleared by Congress.
Right.
And Trump is never going to get, and keep in mind, ideally, Trump actually prevents further conflict with Russians, for example, because he is so buddy-bud with them.
Sure.
So I don't think we have to worry about that. I think we're pretty safe from nuclear fallout for the time being. I think he can create tension. I think he can create economic distress. I don't think he can create actual conflict, actual, mortar, guns conflict. I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think people have to worry about that. If anything, that would go against Trump's mantra, because Trump's entire inauguration today was almost traditional Republican in the sense of let's get our faces out of everyone else's.
Mm-hmm. Well, it would be interesting moving forward which way he supports with Russia and China and Mexico. So
yeah,
I agree with you. There's a lot of, like you said, checks and balances. We do have a Republican House and Senate. You never know what can go that way. They do like to spend the money on the military. So
they do, but they all don't want to. They got burned by Bush.
Yeah, they are also conservative, and the thing is they don't want to fiscally do that and put the country into a spin. But you just never know. So
well, the last thing Republicans want is for them to have their brand new administration, their last administration, essentially leaving. Not disgraced by any means, but right. people really dislike the Bush administration for a number of reasons, perhaps most notably perceived unnecessary foreign entanglements. And that's something Trump has hammered really hard against. I would argue that's probably one of the reasons the Bushes really don't like him. Right. So I think one of the last things Trump wants to do is send a bunch of troops somewhere and repeat mistakes that were made particularly by George W. In the aftermath of 9/11. So whoever wrote that question, don't worry. We're not going to have nuclear fallout. We're not going to have a world war. He might create some economic distress, or maybe he can actually help it. Who knows? Maybe I'm going to sound like Trump here, but maybe having somewhat more open relations with Russia is not an awful thing. It's also something that has to be very, very carefully navigated, very similar to President Obama handling Cuba. So we're going to have to see that in the coming weeks and coming months and see what he does.
Okay, Brett, where can everybody find us, and what time is our next broadcast?
Okay, I'm on Twitter at Rivers Rubin. You can tweet at Blazing Caribou. You can also tweet at Statecraft Pod, and you can find us on Facebook at Statecraft. Look for that as well. You can find us again live with a panel. I will be on studio mics again. It's going to be a lot of fun. And we're going to be doing that at 7 p.m. Eastern. So that is 3 hours from now. It's going to be a really great panel. And then finally, we're going to be doing some level of coverage from the Women's March, likely in the afternoon. We'll do one live broadcast because after that, I'm heading out of the city and moving toward Pittsburgh. I'm stopping in Pittsburgh for the night. Oh, so I won't be in the newsroom again tomorrow night. Okay. But in any case, we'll at least do some Women's March coverage as well. And once we have a time for that, it'll be on all those portals that I just mentioned. Excellent. So yeah, people come on back in 3 hours. We're going to have a great panel discussion. Be a lot of fun.
And thanks to Katie Talmo and Anud Kareem for hanging out with us in the chat room. We really appreciate it. And maybe we can get some of your questions answered in the next panel. That would be great.
Absolutely.
Right. Thank you so much, Brett, for joining us as usual and having some great coverage down there. I can't wait for all of this. This is I'm so glad that you started this. This was such a great idea. So thank you for doing that.
Yeah, absolutely. And we have a lot of I've been doing audio the entire day, so we have a hell of a lot of coverage that's going to be on that Statecraft feed as of next week.
Yeah, I can't wait to see it. So okay, we will talk to you soon. Thank you so much.
All right, thanks, Carrie.
All righty, bye-bye.